Hello.
Hello, everyone.
We're back in the flesh.
In the flesh.
After about, 2-3 months.
Yeah, the last one we had was online, wasn't it?
Which was before Christmas.
Yeah, you're right, actually.
So, yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
Got a huge pile of records to share.
I know, much bigger than we thought. We also bought some just before the show as well.
Yes. And also records were arriving on the day of the show. So anyway, for anyone who doesn't know what we do, John and I have for many years met up normally once a month and just played records to each other and tried to get some sort of a flow musically between what we're playing.
So this one was quite random, actually.
It was quite random, but there was themes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So John arrived yesterday afternoon, and we, between watching 2 Six Nations rugby matches, we popped into the local second-hand emporium, and I picked up this, which I've never seen before, which is a Chicago Live in Japan album, double live. I mean, to be fair, I've barely listened to it. In fact, the first track I'd ever heard on this was played in the session, which was 25 or 624. It's recorded in 1972, so it's kind of peak Terry Kath guitar playing, and an incredible example of his guitar work on that particular tune. So yeah, and it turns out it was got it for a very reasonable price.
Very reasonable price
for what it seems to be worth. So
I wish I'd been in that rack rather than when I was in. No, I just remembered reading about it. I read a review it saying it was one of the great live albums and really worth getting. Yeah. So keeping with the horn rock thing and keeping with my kind of ongoing obsession with discovering one of the world's most popular bands rather later on, played Tedeschi Trucks off their, I think my favorite, Don't Let Me Get By album, which I think is my favorite of theirs, and played the track Don't Know What It Means, which has got a great bass line from Tim LaFave. Anyway, I love their music. We're going to see them as well, but not until December.
Yeah, it's a long way. Well, I've sort of been really trying to pick up bargains recently, and there's a market stall in my local town who have some £1 bins, and I discovered this album, which is by a band called Racing Cars, who were around in the mid-70s, Welsh band. They sort of seem to just blend perfectly with Tedeschi Trucks, even to the extent that it sounded entirely contemporary, contemporary recording. It was quite bizarre. We listened to a track called was it Down by the River Swampy?
It was Down
by the River, yeah. We were just having this conversation about, this was recorded in 1977. This was a band who were gigging all over the place around the UK, I guess probably from between about 75 to 77, and kind of almost overnight, I imagine, lost all of their bookings because punk had suddenly appeared. And literally it was the case that if you appeared competent on your instruments, then somehow you weren't really getting bookings anymore. I mean, I was around, so I should have been one of the punks, but as a musician, I couldn't really get this idea that everyone had to pretend that they couldn't play anymore. It seemed a bit.
It was a very odd time, actually, and I think also, I mean, being so old, I can remember life before punk as well as Smart Can. I mean, I think punk also seemed like it was just like slightly revamped, faster pub rock for me, a bit as well.
Yeah,
and not really very interesting. So keeping with it anyway.
But anyway, that was great.
Yeah, it was sounded really good.
Really,
and I think I might have even had that record actually.
Really?
One time. Yeah, I think so. Just something very familiar about it. Been on a bit of a Murray Clayton trip recently. I just think largely because I kind of rewatched Performance recently and just got kind of struck by her amazing singing on that. Picked up this album very cheap. I think again it was like £1 or 50, maybe even less actually, recently. And played her version of Keep Your Eye on the Sparrow, which was Dave Grusin. The theme music for Beretta. It'd be interesting to know if anyone else can remember the Beretta TV show as well. Great version of it. Whole album produced by Eugene McDaniels, who's one of our heroes.
Who was Gene by this stage, I know.
Yes, that's right.
Gene anymore.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So kind of nice. Not one of her kind of not one of her more well-known albums, but really good. Great drumming from Steve Gadd on there as well.
Right. Well, this was another arrival yesterday through the post. Some of you may know who this is. This is Sylvester, who was a kind of disco icon, I guess, of the 70s. Most famously known for the track Mighty Real, but actually fantastic R&B soul singer as well. And this track Over and Over, I was listening to a radio show which was celebrating the Loft club in New York. I can't remember, it's 50 years or something. It was a big anniversary, 52 years. And the original of Over and Over by Sylvester apparently was a Loft classic. And I've got it on CD, and I thought I was buying it on vinyl. It did seem quite cheap, but I've ended up with the Con remix, and I don't know who Con is, but
it's fantastic.
Yeah, he seems to get hold of master tapes and does very sympathetic remixes, which in some cases I think even surpass the original.
Yeah.
Anyway, fantastic. It's just an amazing feel-good party track with such a vibe going throughout it. So
it just really continuously breaks it down in really interesting
ways. Yeah,
so
much space. Well. Yeah, really great. If you don't know Sylvester's Over and Over, I highly recommend you check it out.
And there's a really, Con did an amazing remix. The first time I heard of him was a kind of reversion, really, of Mothership Connection, which is almost the original, I think. Actually.
And obviously Sylvester, famously an out gay icon of that time, which for black artists was a very rare side.
DJ Soul Sister on Instagram also. I've been listening to a radio show for a long time, actually. She does a show on WWOZ in New Orleans, which is a fantastic funk-based show. And she's been talking a lot about Switch, the band Switch, recently. And I kind of got so interested by what she was saying on her that I went to buy the record on Discogs, and then found out I already had it, actually, but only as a kind of Motown promo. And this is the album, This Is My Dream. And the band were kind of a mixture of people from the El DeBarge family, but also there's some Ingrams in there as well. And it's a very nice record. Quite a few of the tracks are arranged by Claire Fisher, who's we're big fans of over here, as is Prince and various other people. And play the track All I Need Is You. Kind of great, very unfashionable in a weird kind of way, early 80s kind of soul music, really.
Yeah. I did a radio show on Thursday, which was the day after Russia invaded Ukraine, and I just thinking, what am I going to play? Just what's appropriate. So I ended up doing 2 hours of shows that were all about peace, or peace was somewhere in the title, and kind of just looked through all the records I have and found out, actually discovered several tracks that I'd either never heard or completely forgotten about, including When the World's at Peace by the OJs from the album Backstabbers. And what a wonderful,
great sound.
What a wonderful recording this is. We were saying very kind of funkadelic, Norman Whitfield influenced, kind of epic, and brilliant track. I mean, obviously everyone knows the track Backstabbers, but the track before that on the album is really worth a listen. And of course, such essential sentiments for the time that we're living through at the moment.
I've got a very odd, well, not odd, but I've got a very kind of unusual double album, OJ's compilation of just their mid-tempo and ballad stuff, which is great. I play a lot, actually. It's a really good one. This, I think I might have talked about before. I've talked about on the radio show a lot, but it's a record that came out of, whoops, I think it's falling over here. This is from a group called The Brother Moves On, which is kind of like an art collective, actually, in South Africa. And I think, as you probably know from previous shows, I spent a lot of time in South Africa over the years. And this is kind of feels like the music I've been waiting for to come out of South Africa, actually. It's this band they've rearranged and reorganized some earlier music from people like Mongezi Fazer and Philip Tabani and so forth, and added very kind of contemporary elements to it as well. And it's just a great record. I've been playing it almost continuously since I got it a few weeks ago. And it's come out on an album called Matsudi Label. And I played the track You Think You Know Me, which is a kind of poem, a contemporary poem, very, very hard hitting
Mm.
kind of rap over the top of a great Mongezi Phaser song. Highly recommend this record. Quite a few people are giving a lot of play at the moment. It really deserves it. Great, just felt like exactly what I wanted to hear coming out of South Africa. Really good stuff. And yeah, the band are called Tolika Toliki. And so the album's called Tolika Toliki and the band's called The Brother Moves On. Very highly recommended.
Well, something else that is music that I've just been waiting to hear from without kind of knowing exactly what I was waiting for is this album, which came out digitally, I think at the beginning of last year. Appeared very, very briefly on vinyl and then endlessly was getting put back. And it's Notes with Attachments from Blake Mills and Pino Palladino. Although Sam Gendel, Chris Dave, Larry Goldings, it's that kind of fascinating hybrid of players who are all coming from different scenes, but have actually crafted something that genuinely doesn't sound like you've heard it before, which and the production and the sounds are just absolutely fantastic and just really hard to categorize. I mean, broadly it is jazz, it's kind of experimental, it's going somewhere that you're not expecting.
Although neither of them, of course, are jazz players.
None of them are jazz players, exactly. But if you haven't heard this album, then you are in for a treat. It's absolutely sensational. It's very short, but this pressing sounds absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it does.
On impulse, in fact. So Pino Palladino, Blake Mills, yeah, definitely tune into that.
I would say it's the best thing I've heard for a very, very long time.
I would say
probably years and years and years.
I would agree with you.
By absolutely miles.
Yeah.
So keeping with Blake Mills, and this is an album that's a lot of people have a playing pile. I always have a playing pile, but and this has never left the playing pile actually since it came out 5 years ago now. And this is the Jim James album, Eternally Even, and produced by Blake Mills and featuring also Chris Dave. That was a connection, really. And I played the first track off that Hide in Plain Sight. Just think it's a great album. It's got a really kind of unified kind of sound across it. Very kind of epic sounding record, actually, and a lot of interesting kind of textures. Very unusual sounding. It doesn't really sound like any of his other solo albums at all. Just think he's a kind of very interesting character, really.
I agree.
He doesn't really need to make music like this, but I'm very glad he does. Really. So yeah.
Jim James from A Morning Jacket.
Morning Jacket. And I think if you ever get a chance to have a look at his duet with Erykah Badu on YouTube, absolutely fantastic. The Texan stuff in that.
This also arrived yesterday, and I know very little about it apart from I heard one track, which is called The Meaning of Love, which I just thought sounded absolutely sensational. Steve Kuhn, keyboard player, collaborating with Gary McFarland, who I first heard of because he wrote one of my favorite Donny Hathaway tunes, Sack Full of Dreams. And I've kind of been down a Gary McFarland rabbit hole before, and he died tragically in 1971 of a methadone overdose, apparently. But he was great pals with Steve Kuhn, the keyboard player, and they made this album together, which I can't talk about very much because I haven't really heard it apart from that one track. But I will say it does have Ron Carter on the bass, Billy Cobham on the drums, and Airto on percussion. And then there's a string quartet as well. So it's how would you describe this show?
It's kind of like it's the time when people were really doing a lot of experiments for fusion. So there was that whole period where it hadn't really been nailed down what it was supposed to be. So you had Steve Kuhn, you also had people like Fourth Way around that time, and Jeremy, what was the name of that flute player? Jeremy somebody. Steig, yeah. Really interesting kind of risk-taking stuff. Steve Kuhn, of course, was the first pianist in the John Coltrane Quartet. So he was there before McCoy Tyner. So the very early records with Coltrane featured Steve Kuhn. Yeah. And he also recorded a lot on other labels as well, including ECM. And in fact, weirdly enough, I bought a Steve Kuhn ECM album with me to play, but I didn't play that.
So this has just been reissued, and I suspect it's going to disappear very fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, catch this while you can.
So something about that, and I don't know what I think it might be some sonics involved with that as well. And I've been having a bit of a Calexica. I mean, I listened to a lot of Calexica many years ago, and I hadn't really been listening to them for a while actually. And I've just been kind of Yeah, slightly inspired by their musicality and how interesting their records are. Very, very diverse. And I played the two tracks that segue at the end of this album. This is the album Feast of Wire. And I played the two tracks No Dose and Crumble at the end of this, which almost sound like a Gil Evans.
I thought it was Gil Evans.
When it starts off and then moves into almost like a kind of ambient kind of folk thing afterwards. Just very interesting band, I think. And, they consistently made good music. And I've also been listening to a lot of their music with Iron and Wine as well. Great combination. And that'll probably come out for the next session. So yeah, Feast of Wire. Nice sounding vinyl as well, actually.
Well, sadly, this week we lost the vocalist and songwriter Gary Brooker from Procol Harem. And in my early teenage years, I had the albums Grand Hotel and this album, which is called Exotic Birds and Fruit. I think this came out in 1974. Procol Harem, well, John was saying he always gets Procol Harem and the Moody Blues mixed up. I guess there's a certain kind of similarity, but a very kind of UK sound. And actually, I like his voice, and I think they were doing some interesting music. I particularly like the guitarist Mick Grabham, who's on this album. Obviously, Robin Trower used to play with Procol Harum as well. He was somebody else that I was very into when I was about 13.
I like Robin Trower.
I like Robin Trower. Yeah. Anyway, we listened to the track called The Idol, and this whole album's great, actually. Sort of not, I guess it would sort of fit into a prog description, but it isn't really prog. It's something original. And I never really kind of properly engaged with it for some reason, but there was a particular kind of sound about English music around it, with the shoegaze around it. So I played this for a while and stuck this on. This is Outside by David Bowie, of course, and just really struck me more and more. This sounds like, although it was recorded many, many years before, it almost sounds like the dad of Black Star in a way, the very similar kind of vocal template for Black Star. Got a very similar kind of vocal style on it, although it's got a lot of fretless bass on it, which kind of slightly dates it as being written from that time. But it's a great sounding record, this. And of course, it's been reissued in the various box sets that have come out recently in different form. But I quite like this is a kind of edited version of the album. Just amazingly creative music, really. And the last, think of the last time you ever collaborated with Brian Eno was this album as well. And it was never got very good reviews because I don't think people liked the way it was described at the time, because Brian Eno took hours and hours and hours of material and chopped it up into shorter tracks, and I don't think the rock people like that kind of approach to music. Well, this another brand new record for me. It was a Christmas present from John. That just shows how long we haven't seen each other. And this is the soundtrack of the fantastic Zappa documentary film that I think we were going on about the last time we made a video. I can't really talk very much about the music. John can, because he knows it, but we did listen to Road Ladies, which featured George Duke on the organ and sounded brilliant, and as ever a Bernie Grunman mastering job. Wonderful.
Sounds good. I mean, I must admit, this has been sitting shrink wrapped on my pile for the whole, and I've been very tempted. So the more I look at it, the more I realize that a lot of the tracks on that album have never been out on vinyl before, actually. Yeah. So I'm going to have to get myself a copy of that myself.
Yeah, really nice.
Yeah. Great document. I mean, if you haven't seen it already, even if you don't particularly like Zappa, it's an incredibly interesting
really
film.
is.
I think it's so much. I don't need to talk about this. This is Hendricks' Cry of Love, really. But again, my copy was really severely overplayed and kind of wounded, probably from various substances being smoked on top of it at different times, actually, in the past. And but yeah, great. One of my favorite Hendricks albums, actually. Obviously, it was a posthumous one, but really does feel very coherent, I think. And I played the track Drifting off here as well. And again, Bernie Grundman, who seems to be the theme of this evening.
Probably less coherent, but in fact, the very first Hendrix album I ever bought was the Alan Douglas produced Crash Landing. And I have to say, for ages, I never knew that there was another version of Stone Free.
Yeah.
I love this version, Stone Free, again. In fact, we listened to the incredibly visceral and heavy track, which is called Peace in Mississippi, featuring Bob Babbitt on the bass. And it's just, I mean, yeah, it's an assault.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It really was. Again, this was going to be in my radio selection, but it's not very peaceful. But
definitely not. Hard to keep it out of the red, I think, on the
Yes.
VU meters as well.
Yeah, Peace in the Mississippi. Have a listen to that.
It's a shame that almost none of those kind of none of the records from that kind of period would ever come out again. Actually,
No.
because Alan Douglas, I don't know what happened. I'm never very clear what happened to the tapes. I'm sure the Hendricks family will get it. Anyway, so something about that reminded me of She's Always in Your Hair, which is just one of my favorite ever Prince songs on the B-side of Paisley Park. And I played the 7. I couldn't find the 12-inch actually, so I played the 7-inch version of it, which just sounded great, really. Just kind of, there's so much stuff hidden away on B-sides and weird places with Prince. And I think I can't say, I hope there's going to be a compilation of Around the World in a Day, because it's definitely my favorite Prince album. I can't wait. I'll happily buy a 10 album box set of that.
Well, another B-side classic on 1999, which is How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore. And a good friend of mine and John, called Ricky, a guitarist, has been producing tracks every week that he shares with a number of people. And he shared a version of this, and I've never heard it before. And then I realized I actually had it on the B-side of 1999, and fantastic minimal track with basically just Prince and piano. Beautiful song.
Incredible, really interesting tiny little production touches on it. Weird bits of it, interesting bits of reverb and bits of it's just very clever. And this guy's genius, really.
And incredible vocals on that.
Yeah. And there's a good, really nice version of it on One Night Alone as well, the box set.
Which I realise I also have and don't seem to know that.
And I think if I remember right, it segues in with Sometimes It Snows in April as well, which is a pretty good combination. This is Kiefer, very good name, of course. Very happy to have a record out by someone called Kiefer, who's a keyboard player from Los Angeles, part of that kind of new breed of musicians who seem to have huge amounts of technique and chops and really don't show it off in any kind of ostentatious kind of way. Really interesting musician, actually. And played his version of Everybody Loves the Sunshine, as Mark said, really difficult album track to cover, really, which also features the trumpeter Theo Croker on there as well. Just a really nice version of it. Interesting
toy piano work.
Toy piano, or maybe I think toy piano and xylophone, it sounds like, on there as well. But yeah, this is the third in a set of EPs, and it's called Between Days. And in the UK, I mean, it's very reasonably priced in the UK, so it must be very cheap in the States as well to get really good stuff, actually. Nice sounding record.
Again, something that's just come out is this second EP collaboration between Khruangbin and Leon Bridges. The first one was called Texas Sun, and this one is called Texas Moon. And just this kind of beautiful, ethereal, reverb-drenched guitar with very minimal playing, just bass, drums, and guitar, and then a very sympathetic vocal setting for Leon Bridges. They just sound like a unit. There's only 5 tracks I think on here, but absolutely lovely music.
I have to say, not knowing Texas very well, having driven across it, well, nearly all the way across it once, actually, it does feel very Texas as well.
I have been to Texas briefly, but yes.
So JJ Cowell's a favourite with both of us, and you'll know if you've watched previous videos, but this one often gets overlooked, largely because it's got such a horrible cover. But it's late in record. It came out, I think, in 1989, and it was after a long period where he hadn't made any music at all. But it just sounds like a JJ Cowell album. It doesn't sound like it looks at all, actually. And I think he recently got a kind of makeover, and it came out on a very, very deluxe edition. But it's a really good album, this one, actually. And he does take one or two kind of departures in terms of his production style on here as well. But I played the track Lean on Me off this, which has the usual crew of Tim Drummond and Jim Keltner and others playing on it as well.
And there's nothing to do with Bill Withers.
Nothing to do with Bill Withers.
One of my favorite guitarists is this guy, Phil Upchurch. And this, again, an album I picked up from a different market stall in Faversham last week. This track is called Lovin' Feeling. It's a gatefold, actually, which is rather nice. There is Phil in full flight. Yeah. Great. What a great guitar player he is. he covers the Curtis track "Keep on Tripping" and uses Curtis's bass player, Lucky Scott, on this. We listened to the track called "Washing Machine," which was super funky. Yeah, I mean, it's all instrumental. Just a very tasteful player who kind of, yeah, he's got, you know, has got the jazz chops, but is also very sort of funky, very soulful, very bluesy, without ever sort of overdoing it. Just very fluid. And I love the album Darkness, Darkness, which you turned me on to.
Love that one.
This feels like a companion piece, if you like that.
Yeah, definitely. There's a very funny interview with Eric Gale on radio show once when he was Phil Upchurch, of course, a great bass player as well.
Yeah.
And Eric Gale's also a great guitar player and a great bass player. And he said, well, he does the West Coast and I do the East Coast. He's got it all covered. So I'm not sure what the connection was here, but then when I went for McCoy Tyner record that I've been playing quite a lot recently, which is like we're playing a lot of McCoy Tyner records recently as well. Played the album Fly with the Wind, which has got arrangements and conducted by William Fisher. And Mark just pointed out that his album Circles, which I've been looking for the whole of my life.
And so
it's just about to be reissued as well. And this is a great album with Ron Carter again, Billy Cobham, Hubert Laws, and a string section, which sounds like it could be cheesy, but actually sounds great. Actually,
there's nothing cheesy about
nothing
that.
cheesy. Incredibly intense drumming from Billy Cobham, actually.
Mm.
And I think he's, and Mark said this, I think he sounds best in this kind of context. Actually, almost rather hear him playing McCoy than I would with Mahavishnu in some ways. Actually, just
definitely.
really dynamic stuff. Actually, this is a good one. Anyway. Also, another gatefold. A nice picture of them all around the piano.
We had a 7-inch single break. This is General Echo and a track called Arlene, and it features the Stalag 17 bass and drum line, the bass line, which is just a fantastic rhythm track that you will hear on many other tracks like Tenor Saws Ring the Alarm and not Sister Ants. There's loads and loads of tracks that I think
there's a Dennis Brown track that uses it as well.
I'm sure everyone's used it. Just absolutely, it's just the vocal, the bass and the drums, that's it, and just some little flourishes of reverb every now and again. And
nice drumming as well.
It's great drumming, really, really nice. And then this track, which I don't really know anything about, and I thought I was buying a reggae single, but I don't think it is. It's on the Coal Mine record label. And it's
the famous Bakersfield reggae sound.
Exactly, by the Soul Chants featuring Wesley Bright. Now we listened to the track called Who Could It Be? I don't know when it came out. I know it's just been reissued or it's just come out, but it has those beautiful ethereal backing vocals that I associate with bands like Cotton and the Shoes and Melodians and people like that. But I'm pretty sure it's a soul track. Anyway, or maybe this is the kind of music that those reggae vocal groups were hugely inspired by. I don't know, but it's a great tune.
It's a very good tune, yeah.
And so I did a double 7-inch share there.
Very good. And then to show that one. Then moved to something I think I played in a match session a couple of years ago, actually, which is an album by Blyde Blind on the excellent Hubro label out of Norway. Very interesting band. Two of the band are multi instrumentalists, including this guy called Shazad Ismaili, who seems to be on virtually every record that's coming out at the moment. He basically plays. I remember seeing a week at Tonic. I think it was in New York. I think it was curated by Mark Rebo. And this guy, every night there was an incredible bass player or amazing drummer or amazing keyboard player. And by the middle of the week, I suddenly realized every time it was the same guy playing all his instruments. And he's played with Michel Endeyo cello. Anyway, this is a good band with Shazad Ismaili, Hilma Jensen, and Ovid Scarbo. And it's their second album. And I played the track off here called Jidu. And every track is so completely different. It goes from almost kind of mid-tempo rock to free improvisation to and there's only 6 tracks on the album, basically 8 tracks on the album. Very interesting stuff, actually. Good, very good label. Always worth checking them out.
Wonderful cover.
Wonderful cover.
And I was.
That is Mark. In fact.
I had to fundraise for a whole day wearing one of those suits once as a chicken. We listened to Loose Ends, UK street soul. This is featuring Carl McIntosh. I think he really was loose ends.
Yeah.
The other two guys were obviously part of it, but I think he was really the innovator. This was a track that came out, I guess, early, 1990. There you go. Don't Be a Fool. And I don't know, there's just something, we're just talking about how, Soul to Soul tend to kind of get all the accolades for this period of innovative UK sort of soul music, but actually Loose Ends really,
Loose Ends of the band too.
They were the band. They were definitely doing something really interesting. It was reminding us a little bit of the System, but really it sounds entirely UK.
I think it might. I was thinking Loose Ends might have actually been before the System. In fact.
Oh, quite possibly.
Yeah, but I mean, Maya Jazzy, what he did really, in sense, but I mean, they weren't really a band, and
no,
both of us had quite negative experiences seeing them live.
They were fantastic if you saw Jazzy DJing.
Yeah,
in the early days, but as a band.
Yeah, I actually put him on once in a youth centre, and he DJ'd for an hour and a half, and he just played I Found Loving over and over again and taught all the kids, virtually every kid in the room, how to mix. Actually, it was really good. Actually, bless him. I never paid him. Actually, I still got a check for him. Then moved to Cyrita, and this is a weird one. I needed a new copy of this. Was my other copy had got some real kind of worn out, I think, actually, and so I picked this up off eBay, and it's from a Vinyl Me Please set, and I think it must have come out of the box set. But it's an amazing pressing. Absolutely sounds incredible.
Really did sound
and really, really nicely put together. So really pleased to have this. Actually, it's just always been one of my favorite records. I think this might actually be my third copy of it, which I've ever had. And I played Black Maybe off here, which is just a brilliant song. Actually, absolutely brilliant song. Yeah, this is real heavyweight.
It is
great stuff.
It is. Okay, we're back into the £1 bargain bin, and I picked this up a few weeks ago. This is one of those albums that you would never pick up on the strength of its cover. I think we can safely say there's
a tradition of very awful
the Four Tops are sort of, I think they're kind of by a little pond or something, looking at a catfish. It's called a catfish. No, it's not a pond, but anyway. Track we listened to, Strung Out for Your Love, sounded absolutely fantastic. It was like a kind of Mizell Brothers track, actually. It's really lovely groove, and definitely worth the price of admission just for that tune. Check it out, Strung Out for Your Love.
Really good.
Levi Stubbs, when he appears, it's just sensational.
I really like the other Four Tops song when they're all standing around with a wheelbarrow and 4 shovels as well. That's not an obvious cover. This is another thing brought down the road just before the show. Just needed a new copy of this. In fact, turns out I haven't got a copy of it at all, actually, and played the original version. This is Leon Russell's Carny, which I think is probably my favourite of his records, and played the classic Masquerade of here as well. Wonderful. Which sounded really, really good.
Which I first heard on this album, which I also picked up. Well, it's not much to see here, is there, folks? This is the this is the George Benson collection, double album. Wonderful version of this Masquerade, but actually I heard we listened to his version of Nature Boy, which is also beautiful.
I think that's one of the best compilations. Yeah, one of the other really good compilations is the Doors Weird Scenes Inside the Goldmine, which is almost better than all the original records. Fantastic. Been listening to a lot of Neil Young. It kind of feels like time for the grown-ups at the moment a little bit, actually, with what's going on in the world, and kind of been listening to a lot of Neil Young recently. This was Homegrown, which was a whole album that was never released back in after Harvest time, but yeah, it sounds amazing, and also the kind of mastering on all these Neil Young releases just sound beautiful. And played the track.
Remind us who's mastering, John.
On this one, it's Chris Bellman.
Oh, actually. not Bernie.
Yeah, Chris Bellman from Bernie Grundman. But not, and played the track Separate Ways, which has got some great drumming on it from Levon Helm as well. Something really, really good.
It did sound great. I picked this up finally, having John often going on about what a brilliant album this is, and having, I'm sure, played it at numerous sessions, is Stephen Still's Manassas. And yeah, we listened to both of us, Bound to Lose in brackets. Fantastic album, so varied, but such a kind of consistent thread, and wonderful production, and just possibly the peak of Stephen Still's musical output, I feel.
Very interesting band, could go in lots of different. There's a very good DVD actually, which I think I'm pretty sure was recorded in the UK of the band, and they could go off in so many different directions. Actually, very talented group. Now, knowing Mark is a huge Bob Dylan fan, I had to play a Bob Dylan track. But the reason I played it really was for the words, and a lot of people have been quoting these words from Masters of War this week, and it's so relevant to what's going on at the moment. I mean, just extraordinary, really. And it's I mean, this is obviously, I don't need to tell anyone, it's an absolute classic record. If you like Bob, you know this one very well. But yeah, seeing the words of Masters of War written out just makes you think, my God, we're in that space at the moment. Anyway, sadly.
Very sadly. And again, this is I think this was the last track I played on the recent Peace radio show, but I just felt it was an appropriate one to sign off with last night. This is from the real McCoy Tyner, and just a beautiful track called Search for Peace, which is really where we're at.
Yeah.
So yeah, very nice to be back.
I've got to play one more track.
Oh yeah, sorry, John.
Played one CD just to finish the whole thing off, and that was from Bill Frisell's CD of music from John Lennon, and it's called All We Are Saying. And I played his amazing version of Give Peace a Chance with him and Greg Leese on guitars, pedal steel, and Jenny Scheinman and Kenny Wollison, and I can't remember who's on bass, Tony Sher on bass. Great album. I remember seeing this band live without the bass and drums, actually, so it was just the two guitars and the violin, and they sat, and everyone was expecting a typical Bill Frisell gig, and they just started playing, and it was like an ambient kind of drift for about the first 15 minutes, and then you suddenly heard these John Lennon songs, and almost at the same point everybody in the audience suddenly twigged, because he had no idea they were just playing Lennon music, and suddenly the whole audience started to pick up what was going on. And it's an amazing set. It's a continuous hour and a quarter set without break. And they just segue through the whole thing. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you for listening to us going on. Do stick something down in the comments. Do listen to John and I's radio shows, which are very much reflective of the kind of music that we've just been sharing. If you want to hear some examples,
reflective of a few of the songs I've shown.
Indeed. And take care, everyone, and keep listening.
Yeah, and keep safe, and peace to everybody.
Absolutely.